Welcome to the Hollywood Outsider, an award-winning weekly entertainment podcast. In this episode, we have an interview with PETA about animals in the entertainment industry, and then we're going to discuss the details of that interview after that is over. This is a special episode of our podcast, so let's get on with the show. My name's Aaron Peterson. Joining me today are my fellow host, John Davenport.
Oh, that feels so much better this week.
Amanda Sink.
Hello, hello.
And Troy Heinrichs.
I was supposed to do the interview, and I didn't show up, so that's why I got relegated to the back.
Yep, you're lucky you got invited back. That's what I'm saying. Poor Troy was running late, so he wasn't able to participate. He was going to, though. Amanda was traveling. Remember, you can always find more information at thehollywoodoutsiders.com, and if you want to hear our recent Bad Movie Night episodes for Twilight Zone, the movie, and other films, panels from South by Southwest, and a whole lot more exclusive content, it's available on Patreon. It's where fans support their favorite podcasts. Patreon.com/thehollywoodoutsiders. Let's get into the interview. Everybody here is going to be on the backside of this. I want to get the interview out here first. So, a while back, we did a segment on a horse that passed away on the set of Amazon Prime's The Rings of Power, right? Reportedly due to cardiac arrest. We made our comments and riffed on PETA's condemnation of the death. Well, PETA heard this segment because they're everywhere. And Katie Cryer, who is PETA's manager of media relations, reached out to us with an offer. Let's have an honest discussion about animals and entertainment and any points on PETA on your podcast. We agreed, and John and I sat down with Courtney Penley, the PETA coordinator of animals in TV and film production, to discuss what it is that PETA wants Hollywood to do exactly and what that means for the entertainment industry as a whole. We do dive into some tougher questions as we go, and I have to say I commend Courtney for speaking directly to the points and where she and PETA stand in regards to PETA's efforts. And I want to say, so you might walk into this interview with preconceived notions, right? Maybe you support PETA, maybe you detest them and are eating a steak while you listen to this in protest. I don't know. But I would only ask that you approach the conversation as a whole with an open mind, and we will be on the other side of this interview to discuss our thoughts on the interview as a whole. For this episode, we are talking with Courtney Penley from PETA, the organization formerly known as the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. We recently had a segment where we discussed a horse that died on the set of Amazon Prime's The Rings of Power, and PETA reached out to us to ask if they could come on the podcast to have a real discussion on animals and entertainment and their organization, and we said, all right, let's give it a whirl. So, Courtney, welcome aboard.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Are you terrified? I'm just kidding.
I am. I'm totally terrified.
Don't be.
Aaron's a sweetheart. I'm just me.
You're both incredibly intimidating.
We'll have some tough questions, but I think they're all fair. They're all fair in their stuff I'm sure you've dealt with before. I guess we should start with that specific incident, right? The horse on the series of The Rings of Power. How does PETA see that situation?
With that situation, the way that we see it is we were in touch with Amazon long before the show ever went into production to ensure that they knew exactly how vulnerable horses are and how best to navigate their use for the show. And we said, do not let this show be a repeat of The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey, where 27 animals, including 2 horses, lost their lives. We're here to help. But they were unresponsive, and now a horse is dead. Well,
that just cuts right to the chase then.
Yeah, it's like a totally avoidable incident.
Okay, so give me landscape, if you will. Fill in the gaps. What is PETA's position on using live animals on movie sets for entertainment purposes, and what are the thoughts on movies that use CGI or other special effects to replace or supplement live animals?
Yeah, so when it comes to the use of animals on film and TV sets, we would absolutely love to see no animals at all used in film and TV. But we urge productions to do a little bit of research before they're going to go into production. If they're planning on depicting animals, that might mean reaching out to PETA or just having a meeting with us so we can talk about pre-production training methods that animals often endure, their living conditions, what to expect on set and thereafter. But so we really just want to see no animals used in film at all, if at all avoidable. And yeah, sorry.
No, how receptive are the studios to that?
Well, as far as the studios, we do have some really great relationships with some people at the studios, and they're super receptive to that. But we do a lot of our outreach to the filmmakers and showrunners themselves, and we get great reception. We've worked with several people to talk about what they're planning on depicting in their show, how we can be of help, and the most humane ways to move forward with those projects. And we just get really great reception overall.
Let's dig into like the actual process of what PETA does when it comes to working with animals, especially on movie sets. How does PETA ensure that the animals are used in movies and cared for appropriately?
Yeah, so the work that PETA's Animals in Film and TV Division, or AFTV for short, does is we act as a resource for filmmakers so that we can explain to them why animals don't belong on TV and film sets in the first place, what happens to them before, during, and after filming, the long history of abuses and deaths that have historically happened to animals used in entertainment, and anything else that they might need. Maybe that means looking at a script for messaging or just talking out their plans for use of animals. We have so much research that we've done on the animal training industry and on the film industry. So we just want to act as a resource for filmmakers. And maybe that means they come to us and they say, hey, we're planning to use animals and there's nothing you can do to stop us. What do you think about these animal trainers that we're considering working with? How do we vet these animal trainers to make sure that, you know, they're good guys and that we're doing the best that we can possibly do on set to ensure the animal safety?
I mean, because to be fair, it is a lot more expensive to use CGI instead of an animal, right? What would you guys prefer from a PETA standpoint, that they write entertainment around so animals aren't involved in scenes? Is that kind of where you... I mean, do you believe that using physical animal actors on movie sets causes like undue stress and harm to the animals involved?
Absolutely. Using animals I wouldn't call them animal actors because they're not consenting to be in those projects, but using animals at all does cause undue stress because film sets are really stressful, unpredictable environments. You never know what's going to happen. But I would say that, you know, when you say that CGI is more expensive than using animals, I would argue that it's not, because in this case, an animal died, and that's the ultimate price, right? So when looking at trying to replace an animal, if somebody can't afford to use animal, for instance, I would just say, you know, does this hypothetical low budget filmmaker know someone with horse companions at a ranch that they can go film at? Can they go there? I would invite any low budget filmmakers or people that are concerned about budget to reach out to us, and we can meet and talk about their plans and help them move forward in the safest and most humane way possible.
What's the difference between bringing a horse to the set from an animal trainer and going to a ranch with a horse companion?
Well, there's no one size fits all approach really, other than completely omitting animals from productions altogether. But the process of transporting animals to and from a set is extremely stressful and can be dangerous. And so if we can remove that element, then that's really helpful. Also, going to a ranch, you are often looking at horses that are companions to somebody that owns that ranch, right? Versus hiring an animal trainer whose entire job it is to look at the animals as a commodity to be used in film and television.
I gotcha. And based on what you know now, what measures are taken and what training requirements are implemented to ensure that animals are not subjected to physical or emotional abuse on movie sets? Like, what do the studios do now?
You know, there's actually not any real animal welfare laws that they're required to uphold. And so that's why we're here, because we want to, you know, hold them accountable whenever something bad does happen. So with the instance of the horse, for instance, this is not an isolated incident. It's actually, we're seeing a pattern here. A horse died on set of HBO's The Gilded Age last year. And that production, as far as we know, wouldn't have even come forward to let people know publicly that a horse had died. We only learned about it because we received several whistleblower reports. And so it's really important that there be compassionate people on film sets who are acting on behalf of the animals to ensure their welfare, because of the fact that, you know, there's really just not any regulations that they are required to uphold.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but on Rings of Power, didn't they have people on site to supervise the animals?
My understanding is that of course they had the suppliers, and then they had a veterinarian and American Humane, but American Humane's oversight is clearly ineffective. Even when they are on set, animals have still been put in dangerous situations, injured or worse, as is demonstrated here once again. Additionally, as far as I know, American Humane doesn't monitor offset living conditions, pre-production training, or what happens to animals when they're too old, sick, or no longer profitable to be used in film and TV. So, many of the animals that we see on TV are discarded like trash when trainers are done with them. They're sitting alone in cages at roadside zoos. They're withering away at shelters or even abandoned on the side of the road. So PETA's looking at the whole picture, including what happens before and after filming, not just what's happening on set.
Okay. How do you respond to the accusations that using animal actors, let's just say animals, I agree with you about the actors term. How do you respond to accusations of using animals on movie sets being cruel and exploitive?
Well, are you saying that PETA's the one making those accusations?
No, how do you, other people that feel that way?
Yeah, other people that feel that way.
Yeah, I would say that there is some truth to that, right? So even the most well-intending animal trainers cannot guarantee the safety of an animal on a set. It's just too unpredictable. However, there are a lot of bad actors out there. PETA's investigations into one notorious animal supplier found that dogs were kept in barren, pound-like kennels with concrete floors and no bedding, even as temperatures dropped into the low 40s. 2 cats were virtually starved because the trainer said they were fat, and animals were deprived of adequate veterinary care, including a pig with a skin condition. Yet these animal trainers are still working regularly on Hollywood productions. And so it's up to productions to do their due diligence, right? They can Google these productions and they can find these investigations with video evidence of the abuses that are being alleged against them, or they can just talk to PETA, because we've done a lot of research and we can help them to navigate the use of or the depiction of animals in the most humane way possible. But really, the most humane thing that they can possibly do is just completely omit the use of real animals.
Okay, I have a bit of a hot take question for you. In Hollywood, we recently gone through a period in which the Me Too movement made a lot of huge changes in the production of movies and how Hollywood views actors and the treatment of their co-stars and everything down the line. It started to create a huge list of changes that should have probably hit Hollywood decades ago. Do you think there's going to be some sort of catalyst moment like that for the animal industry? And what do you think it's going to take for us to get there?
I don't know if there's going to be some type of catalyst for the animal industry, though. We've definitely seen a lot of progress already, right? So you would see chimpanzees in Hollywood regularly, but thanks in large part to the work that PETA's done, you no longer see chimpanzees in movies. You see a lot of really excellent CGI instead. And we do think that the future of film, of Hollywood, of film and television, is going to be an animal-free future. However, there's a transitionary process that we're going through, just like with every other social justice movement. And so we understand that we're, in a process of trying to slowly get those animals out. And again, I'm not sure if there's going to be one big catalyst, but I would say, most likely we're going to see wild animals out of film and television first. Wild animals are just that, they're wild, and their needs can absolutely never be met on a film set. So it's never okay to use them, to force them into servitude, and to exploit them for entertainment. And I do see so many people connecting with the use of wild animals and understanding why that's wrong. And so I think that that's probably going to be the first thing that we see go.
And on the subject of using wild animals and also people connecting with wild animals, we take a different look of view of that, where for a lot of people, the only time in their life they get the opportunity to connect with a wild animal is through movies or television, or the inspiration to decide they want to go into an industry that either protects, guides, or teaches all about wild animals is through movies and television. That spark is usually where that comes from. Aaron, can you bail me out?
Isn't there an advantage to people seeing animals that are treated humanely on the screen?
See, Aaron speaks me very well, so.
Great job, Aaron. There's absolutely a great benefit to seeing a depiction of an animal treated humanely on TV, right? Which is why we're all about CGI, animatronics, puppetry, whatever it might be. Any kind of humane technology being used to depict those animals is awesome. And we're all for it, right? Because we want people to see those animals. However, anytime that you see a real wild animal used in a film or TV show, whether or not they look happy to you and they look like they're being treated well, you need to know that that animal was abused. Take primates, for instance. They are curious. They're highly social animals with complex physical and psychological needs that cannot be met on sound stages or at training compounds. And people often confuse a primate's fear grimace with a smile. When in fact, if you see a smiling monkey on your film or TV show that you're watching, then you should know that they're most likely terrified.
And somebody's about to get hurt.
Yeah, actually, I mean, they're absolutely dangerous to have. So it's not only a question of, it's an ethical issue with forcing them into servitude and bringing them to a set and, causing undue stress to that animal, but they are actually dangerous and they're going to lash out because of the fact that they're stressed and they might hurt somebody.
And so when you come to movies like Cocaine Bear, right? I believe PETA was actually okay with Cocaine Bear, right? Because it was all CGI in terms of the presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. So Cocaine Bear is a project that we were in touch with long before it ever came out. We were assured that they were going to use CGI. And then I have to say, I personally saw the trailer and I was like, did they actually use CGI? This is unreal. It looked so good. But I think maybe the point you were getting at is sometimes you see animals treated badly or questionably in film and television. And we understand that that's a reality that does happen. Cocaine Bear is based on a true story where a bear actually ingested cocaine. I know people were really shocked whenever we awarded the boys a Tech Not Terror award last year because of the depiction of the Chase Crawford character eating his really good friend Timothy the octopus. People were like, what? Like, why is PETA condoning this? That's crazy. He's eating an animal. It's a really disturbing scene. But, those are really thought-provoking moments that make people think, oh my gosh, an octopus is super smart and we should probably not be eating them. That's disgusting. But additionally, they used CGI and puppetry, I believe, for that. And it was really cool.
And hopefully gummy worms, because it was gross. As PETA, the organization, you're more concerned thematically. Less concerned thematically with what the uses are than you are just don't use animals. Like if you have a story to tell, it's not so much about the story, it's don't use animals to tell that story. Do you worry about negative impacts from people seeing it? Like people might be terrified of bears, not that they shouldn't be. I'm an avid backpacker, they should be. But along those lines, is that a concern?
I would say number one, we absolutely do not want to see real animals used on a film set, period. Do not use real animals. If there's a way around it, if you can use CGI or puppets, or you can omit it or use stock footage, do that 100%. But we're also concerned with themes, and we regularly work with filmmakers to read their scripts and to check for animal messaging or vegan messaging or whatever it might be. The messaging is super important. I can give you an example. Like in the past, a lot of programs like movies and shows have resulted in people rushing out to buy purebred animals from, from breeders, right? And so that's a really huge problem. And so, for instance, if you're going to have dogs in your show, then we would like to know that they are, mixed breed versus purebred, so that they're not, causing people to rush out and buy a bunch of purebred dogs. And we want to see adoption messaging anytime that there's an option to include it. And so we definitely care about themes, but sometimes when bad things happen to animals in film and TV, the takeaway from that can be, a really positive one for the animals.
Let's talk about depiction. So how do you feel about films that depict animal abuse or violence? I mean, is it okay? It's not okay that a puppy was killed in John Wick, but that he killed everyone that had anything to do with it. Is that okay? I don't know what the rules are.
It's really just a case-by-case basis. Nobody wants to see animal abuse happen on screen, but the fact of the matter is that people really are abusing animals in real life. And so, for instance, if you've got a serial killer and you're doing a show about them and they got their start abusing animals, then it's important that people see that, but it's also more important that no real animals are used in the depiction of it. So we shouldn't be using any real animals to depict those scenes, whether or not they're included. But, those things really do matter. Audiences are highly influenced by what they see on film and TV. And so it's up to filmmakers to be responsible with that messaging.
What type of animal rights issues do you think are often portrayed correctly or incorrectly in movies and television?
Something I really love to see in film and TV is animal rights activists that break into a lab and free animals. That's awesome because we should not be testing on animals. That's totally messed up, right? But often TV shows will use real animals in that lab setting. And it's like, why did you have to do that? There should not be any real animals in cages whenever you have a character that's breaking in to liberate said animals. So, that would be a scenario in which I'd say, great messaging. That's awesome. Why did you use a real animal? You could have absolutely just used a prop.
Testing is always a tricky one for me because I understand the medical need to some degree, but I also feel like it is cruel. It is cruel. So it's difficult to kind of wrestle with it in some ways.
Yeah, that's a whole different podcast, and we've got experts on that. But I would say check out our website because there is a lot of animal testing that's done completely needlessly under the guise that it's needed. And so if you just check out PETA.org, we have a lot of information on that. But you would be really surprised at how much unnecessary, all of it being unnecessary,
sure,
how much of it is not actually validated in any way. And it's really just all about keeping that funding coming in.
So what role do you think movie studios and production companies have in advocating for animal rights?
Yeah, I think that it's really important for movie studios and networks to just do their research, right? Like I said earlier, there are so many animal trainers that we know have broken animal welfare regulations and are keeping animals in bad situations. For instance, with one supplier, law enforcement raided their facility. They've got video footage where they found more than a dozen dogs kept in cramped kennels, stacked on one on top of another in a garage, animals crammed in closets, an alligator in a filthy outdoor pit. And as long as there is demand for animals in film, this horrendous treatment of animals is going to continue, which is why we urge studios, productions, networks, whoever those decision makers are, to omit animals from storylines, use humane tech, use cast or crew companion animals whenever possible. And if they feel the absolute need to include real animals in their production, then they need to be doing some research, right? So just go online, do a little bit of basic research, and you'll see that some of these people that are being hired for productions are bad actors. Reach out to PETA. We've done all of that research for them, and we can chat with them about the issues.
As the Floridian in here, I can tell you that the alligator probably deserved it.
Stop.
No.
Stop.
I'm kidding, but not really. Those things terrify me.
Yeah, they are terrifying, which is why we should leave them out in the wild and we shouldn't mess with them.
Oh, you're absolutely right. We
should not be keeping them in servitude and forcing them onto film sets.
Okay.
It shouldn't be in my backyard at the moment, but it's there too.
Okay, we have a few tougher questions. So are you ready?
Oh, no.
Okay. I think you'll be fine. It's probably nothing that you haven't heard before, but how do you respond to criticisms that organizations like PETA are overly reactive or extreme in their views toward animal welfare in movies and in general? And I will give you like a personal example. Amanda, our other host on the podcast, she couldn't be here due to traveling, but she is a social activist. She sits on the Colorado board of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. She's chaired many fundraisers for various causes because she loves people and animals equally. She's really, like, her heart's always out there. And she did a fundraiser for endangered animals at Buffalo Wild Wings, which was just chosen because of location and availability. And there were representatives of PETA, of the local chapter. They spent the entire event shouting and provoking the attendees. And that's a real event that happened. And I know there are other accounts of similar events. So how do you respond to those kinds of criticisms?
Yeah, without knowing that PETA was there, I initially hear that and I'm like, why are people that defend wildlife eating at a chicken establishment? What I think is more extreme than PETA holding signs and chanting is the fact that, so many animals, so many chickens are forced into factory farms where they don't have any kind of space or autonomy. They don't ever get to breathe fresh air or touch grass. And then they're slaughtered for their meat and we're eating them. I mean, that's extreme in my view. But I would say, in the you said that PETA is highly reactive. So much of the work that we do is proactive. Most of the work that we do is in the private. We do research. I know in my division in particular that we're writing productions, we're meeting with filmmakers, and we rarely ever go to press. We rarely ever do that. However, that being said, media and, public demonstrations are incredibly useful tools for getting important messages out to the public. And if we feel that that's the best method for shining a light on injustices that animals are enduring, then that's what we're going to do. And it's unfortunate that, her organization was there defending the rights of some animals, but I would say, PETA was there defending the rights of all animals, including the animals that are being used for food at Buffalo Wild Wings.
Okay.
What steps does PETA take to ensure the well-being and welfare of the animals that are in their care, as there have been some reported incidents of mistreatment at PETA facilities?
Oh, could you give me an example of the incident?
In particular, there was a Virginia facility that was euthanizing dogs or animals that were unhealthy or actually healthy in the situation. This is off of my memory.
They had no home.
Yeah.
No adoptable home.
No adoptable home. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't speak necessarily to that case in particular because I'm not quite sure which one you're referring to. But I would say in regards to PETA's shelter, just as a hospice has a high mortality rate, so does a shelter that takes in near end of life, feral, aggressive, dying, and discarded animals. PETA takes in all animals without any discrimination, without admission fees, appointments, waiting lists, or obstacles. And so I can guarantee you that every single animal that is in the care of a PETA facility is treated with love, even those that are euthanized. They are held by somebody that's really loving and caring and supportive in their last moments. And so, I'm not quite sure exactly what the scenario you're talking about is, but yeah, I would just argue that, we have a high mortality rate because of that really hard work that we do to support the community in Virginia.
Okay, well, let me spin it. This is something that I can speak to. There are some things I agree completely with PETA on, like completely. I'm very big on an advocacy for all animals. And others, I would argue, just like any large organization, there's a bit of hypocrisy on it. And just hear me out. So, for instance, my kids were never taken to a zoo by me. I refused. I would never take them because I just think it's cruel to go and watch animals in cages that we've basically just plucked out of existence from their homes for our entertainment, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can't support those endeavors. I never can. On the flip side, I do not condone euthanasia of healthy animals that pose no immediate threat simply because they don't have an adoptable home. I believe those animals should be set free. They can fend for themselves, take their chance in the world as we all do. What is PETA's policy of euthanasia on animals in their care, and how is that decision made? And do you understand where I'm coming from? I mean, to me, that's a hypocrisy that we would euthanize animals that are healthy that just don't have an adoptable home.
I absolutely understand what you're saying. And I think what you're saying is you're an advocate for the no-kill movement. And so, animals are individuals, each with their own needs and often heartbreaking stories. But the no-kill movement has reduced them to numbers at a grave cost to their welfare and their safety. They are able to call themselves no-kill by turning away animals that are in need, refusing to provide euthanasia service to those that can't afford to have their animals euthanized at veterinary pricey clinics, charging unreasonable admission fees, forcing people to sit on waiting lists for months, and even giving animals away for free without screening prospective adopters to make sure that they are going to take really good care of those animals. There are terrible policies that are in place that cause enormous suffering. When you say leave the animals to the street and let them fend for themselves because they're healthy, it makes me think immediately of cats and how short their lifespan is when they're outdoors, how extremely hard that they have it. They're prone to being attacked by other animals or by people. And when you have a cat outdoors, that cat is, directly affecting the wild bird population. So it's the issue is that we have an overpopulation crisis, and it's not one that we can adopt our way out of. And the only solution sometimes is to provide euthanasia services. But really what we need to be doing in the first place is making sure that all of our animals are spayed and neutered, and that people are not allowed to go to stores to buy animals from breeders.
But wouldn't it, and I'm just being completely honest, isn't that a bit hypocritical when, there are caretakers that are taking care of animals? Let's say, I'm sure there are wonderful caretakers of animals on Hollywood sets and other places that are giving them a home, they're feeding them and everything else. Isn't that better than putting animals down? I know it's a tricky question.
I think that those are two completely unrelated issues, right? But I would say in regard to those good actors, those really well-intended animal trainers that are taking in animals and using them for productions, again, it's a case-by-case basis. So we really want to encourage productions to vet their trainers. They can visit their location to see firsthand where those animals live and to ask about pre-production training methods. Do they live in a home with their trainer? Do they sleep in a crate or a cage? If they're in a cold garage with no love, no companionship, then I don't know that that is better than them being euthanized at a clinic. As long as that trainer is treating them like a member of the family, they're using positive reinforcement, that's great. But even with that being said, and that animal having a home to go home to at night where they are cared for, film sets are unpredictable, and even the most well-intending person cannot, guarantee the safety of an animal on set because they're really highly unpredictable. I mean, if you've ever walked a dog and they've spotted a squirrel, then the animals are unpredictable and we can't always foresee what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify, I am not part of the no-kill movement. I say just let them be free. That's just where I am. I'm not part of any movement. That's way too much work.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of domestic animals really do rely on humans to take care of them. And so it's hard to set them free and let them fend for themselves, especially when people are driving cars and there are other out there fending for themselves.
Yeah, a stray cat's like equal to a tiny ecological disaster for certain areas. Once you put a stray cat out there, it's a problem for almost every single creature that's smaller than it in the area.
That's why I'm a dog person.
Yeah, and I can tell I am a volunteer for PETA's 24-hour animal emergency hotline. So I've seen firsthand some of the horrors that these animals that are left to fend for themselves on the street are encountering. And I would challenge you just to volunteer for that for a weekend, and then you might change your mind about leaving them out there to fend for themselves.
I might do that. I think it's important to challenge my views, for sure.
The thing about animal handling and or rearing, Lady Hawk got me interested in falconry as a kid, and I've done nothing but research it and understand it and appreciate the art of what those people are doing. And to the degree of understanding that currently we have peregrine falcons out in the wild, and it's almost wholeheartedly because falconers got involved in the preservation of the animals, and then in training birds of prey, and the way these falconers typically do things, they do treat them as family, but they also have an understanding that birds of prey is more of a partnership, and their only way to get them to do anything is through positive reinforcement. The condor is alive and well in the United States because of falconers. Eagles are alive and well because of falconers. Peregrine falcons are because of falconers. But from the outside, somebody can take a look at that whole view on falconers and say, well, that's a problem to the birds, but birds of prey in the wild do not live to be 20, 30 years old, but falconers and bird centers have gotten those birds to be able to get to a point where they can live 20, 30 years old. It's more of an interest thing that, or a difference, I think, in some ways some animals are treated versus others. Okay, that's me. I'm done.
Okay.
Aaron has a lot to work with when it comes to me, because He doesn't ever know where I'm
It's
going.
not about
with
you,
anything.
John. It's not about you.
Mhm.
All right.
It was very interesting, though. Very interesting tidbit that you have there. And it sounds like you know a lot more about falconry than I do. So I can't really speak to that. But I would say, as far as conservation efforts go, I would just want to know that those that are involved in it are accredited, and that the animals are receiving the best possible care, that they're in their facilities that they can. But I can't really speak to that. But it sounds like you know a lot about falconry.
Falconry is kind of my doorway into some of the conservation efforts that I take as a person.
Nice.
I'm what I like to call a flexitarian. So as a flexitarian, what that means is that I eat primarily vegetarian or vegan to a degree, but there are times where I will allow a meat meal creep in, maybe once or twice a week. And the reason why it's called flexitarian is because I do it partially because of my health, but also because of what my research into factory farms has led me to understand. And, I feel like as long as I don't participate as much as I would used to in the buying meat or eating meat, I'm doing my part in reducing the impact those places have.
Yeah, thank you so much for, for what you do, and for the vegan meals that you do eat and for making that your primary diet. That's really great. I just wanted to add too that with the falconry, they still shouldn't be on film and TV sets.
I agree, but there's part of me that's like, I wouldn't be where I am right now or have the views that I have right now if it wasn't for it being on a movie. But I agree to an extent. My problem is when it comes to animals on, CGI versus reality. I have because of I have an art background, and because of my art background, I notice things about movement and musculature, and I know too much about how the sausage is made when CGI happens that it takes a lot to convince me that CGI is not CGI. You mentioned that in Cocaine Bear, you were convinced that bear was real. I wasn't, because I have a high uncanny valley issue.
Well, I wasn't, because I've seen actual bears and they just don't move like that.
I think there's a couple of things to be said here, right? So if you have a filmmaking background, you know that you will never, ever look at a movie the same way again.
That's
you just
true.
go into it watching it different. I know, I went to film school and I've worked a little bit in on productions and in film and television. So I look at television and movies a lot different. However, we are supposed to go in with a suspension of disbelief. Okay. Mm-hmm. You want me to believe that I'm in the 1800s and you think that the lack of a horse or a CGI horse is going to be the thing that bumps me, then, that's just not the case, right? Creators are intelligent and they're creative enough to find ways to do this without putting animals at risk. And if it can't be done with CGI, they can do like Alice. I don't know if you saw Alice last year, but during part of that film, we're made to believe that we're in the antebellum South for like the whole first half of that film. Yet they didn't use a single horse. And I challenge most people that went to see that to recall the fact that they didn't see a horse.
Wouldn't there be something to be said, though, for the impact that films with animals have on people? I mean, I can be perfectly honest. I would have never wanted a dog if it wasn't for movies. If I never saw Benji, I swear to God, this is a true story. If I never saw Oh Heavenly Dog, I never, ever would want a dog. I didn't really have any friends that had a dog or anything. And I know that there's a negative to that too, because then you get people that run out and want to adopt a dog and they can't take care of it and they take it back. So there are awful people. Absolutely. But you see what I'm saying? Like, there is a positive impact to some degree.
Totally. There's a lot of positive impact to seeing a depiction of an animal on screen. And that's why I say, if it can be done using humane technology like CGI, animatronics, whatever that might be, that's awesome. In the case of domestic animals like cats and dogs, they often, live in really cruddy scenarios, that are inherently cruel training methods. They, are kept in bearing kennels. And so if somebody's going to use a dog or a cat on a film or TV set, there are humane ways around that. They can do like Bradley Cooper did in A Star is Born, or Tilda Swinton in The Eternal Daughter. We just learned that Patricia Clarkson for Monica brought her own companion animal to set. So as long as that dog that you're seeing on screen is not, languishing away at a prison-like facility and, enduring abusive training methods, but instead, has somebody to go home with at nighttime and lay their head down on a pillow and is living with a loving family, there's no problem with that.
Okay.
All right. I'm in.
Yeah. Great.
You know what? Aaron and I came in with this whole grilling portion of it. Now
Not
it's
really
time
grilling. Those are honest questions.
Yeah, be nice and cut out anything where I don't sound informed. I'm just kidding.
Trust me, John will be gone mostly. So just kidding.
Right.
Kidding.
Yeah, he will be cutting a lot of me out. So can you share with us any sort of notable accomplishments in the field of animal rescue and welfare by PETA?
Oh gosh, I mean, there's so many. One thing that really stands out to me, and I'm not an expert in this. You'd have to talk to somebody else at our organization that really did the work. But there used to be chimpanzees used in Hollywood, which we discussed earlier. But now, thanks in large part to the work that PETA's done, there are no more chimpanzees in Hollywood, and we are, ecstatic about that. We're seeing awesome, humane technology recreations of these animals, like Gordy in Nope recently. But there was this one chimpanzee, Tonka, who was forced to perform film and TV for years. And PETA was like, great, now that, Tonka's out, we really want to move him to a sanctuary and give him a really great life. And we're going to help to coordinate that. But the handler that had Tonka went to great lengths to basically keep Tonka, hidden away in a basement from people. They went so far as to have their husband lie under oath at a court saying that he euthanized this animal and that cremated the animal and that they were no longer alive. But we just didn't believe it. PETA, was really hitting hard with the press. We had rewards out there, and it came to light that Tonka was still actually alive. And we coordinated moving Tonka from that prison-like basement cell that they were in to a sanctuary, which is really exciting.
Wow. That is really exciting.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
And also kind of messed up. It's pretty messed up.
Yeah, it's incredibly messed up. I mean, the victories that PETA sees with animal rescue and liberation are, there's just so many of them. One that's happening right now that I'm really excited about, I don't know if you've been following, you probably have, John, because you're in Florida, is Lolita, who's been, wasting away in a tiny tank at this aquarium in Miami for the past 50 years, is finally on her way home. And so we're just so excited to, be a part of that and to be witnessing this journey as, all of the work is being done to move Lolita to a seaside sanctuary.
That's awesome. Aaron, Lolita is a killer whale.
Yep, I know who it is.
I thought she was a Florida celebrity.
No,
so you wouldn't have known.
I know quite a bit about captured animals like zoos and aquariums and things like that, because I'm just not a fan. So I try to keep up with that as much as I can. And I know some people, oh, that's great to see that dolphin flip over. I'm like, that. Have you seen? I've actually done like the swimming with the dolphins, and I thought it was like open ocean, and it was not when I got there. It was based on the brochures and stuff. And I'm like, if it's open ocean, maybe I can deal with this. But it wasn't, and I was not. It was a hard thing to see and to witness. And I just realized, like, this is just to entertain us. That's not cool, How do you respond? Because I know this happens. I know it happens to your organization a lot, right? There's a lot of people that look at PETA and they say, well, you're extremists. And I know you guys don't feel that way. So what do you say to people that have that stance?
Yeah, again, I would say the most extreme thing that I see is forcing animals into these horrendous situations, forcing animals onto factory farms and then, hanging them up by their feet and slitting their throats while they're still conscious and then eating them, or ripping away, their children so that you can get milk out of a dairy cow, for instance. I think that's pretty extreme. I think, this pipeline of primates that are being kidnapped from the jungle and then forced into laboratories to be tested on is pretty darn extreme. And the same with taking wild animals away from their natural environments and using abusive training methods to make them act in a film or a TV show. That's pretty extreme. Most of the work that I do in my division, and most of the work that I believe most of the people at PETA doing, is behind the scenes. We're working really, really hard to change legislation, to reach out to different organizations that are using animals in some way that is cruel or abusive, to advocate on behalf of those animals. And that's not very extreme. That's it's behind the scenes, and sometimes we do get media coverage, and sometimes we have demonstrations, and you might see it as extreme, but how else are you going to know about those issues, right? Why are we here talking about this today? We're here talking about this today because you saw our response to a horse dying on set.
Yep, that's true.
Of a TV show. And you might not ever know about some of these training, pre-production training methods that they use, for instance, if we weren't talking today and if we hadn't gone to press.
That's a fair point.
This conversation has been great. I've learned a lot from it. I've really appreciated your time for sure.
One final question. What steps can individuals take to support animal welfare in the film industry?
Individuals. So if you are, whether you're a filmmaker or whether you're an audience member, we're urging everyone to recognize that animals don't belong on set. Then filmmakers should stop using them in their productions. There are alternatives, and we invite filmmakers, writers, and anyone in the industry to use PETA as a resource for information and alternatives to using real animals. We also want anybody that's on a film set that's compassionate and sees something questionable happening with an animal, if they see a wild animal, to call us. We take whistleblowers' anonymity very seriously, so they can call us at 323-210-2233 to report any kind of abusive scenarios that they see, or anything just strange, any kind of animals on set that they're concerned about. And as far as the viewing public, audiences can not watch shows that use real animals, especially wild animals. Just don't watch it, and if you're not going to watch it, make sure that you let the producers know why you're not watching it. Go to the network or the filmmaker's website and say, hey, I'm not going to watch this because I saw that you have a real wild animal in it. Or they can even contact us again at 323-210-2233. They can go to PETA.org/report, and they can let us know what they're seeing that's questionable, and then we'll check into it. Excellent.
Well, thank you for doing this, Courtney. I really, really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I had a lot of fun chatting with you guys.
And thank you for taking the harder questions. Okay, thank you again to Katie for arranging that discussion, and to Courtney for a genuinely interesting and real direct conversation. So now John and I are joined by Troy Heinrichs and Amanda Sink, which we met at the beginning, and we can discuss the interview as a whole, as well as our thoughts on animals and entertainment. So, guys, we heard from PETA now on their thoughts. Do you understand what they're saying, or is it unrealistic in your eyes to have a completely animal-free entertainment environment? If so, why?
I really appreciated the dialogue that the two of you had with her. And to your point, Erin, I appreciated the way she responded, because she was very direct, didn't beat around the bush, she wasn't vague, and she was very respectful the entire time. I don't think that it's feasible, at least right now, because of the cost of CGI, for every film to be completely animal free. But one of the things that I really respected about their stance is towards the end of the interview, she had mentioned, and the two of you kind of clarified together, that if it weren't on a set, if it was, done with an animal that had their companion with them, so like the human person who owns that animal and has that relationship, and there's all of these other structures in place to make sure that that animal isn't put in any harm's way, or just put in positions where they could be harmed, or where they're living in neglect and things like that, which is a lot of what she had shared. That, I think, is something we should absolutely strive for. We should absolutely try to find ways and be more creative with our production. And if we can go to a farm to use a horse or something like that, keeping them in their natural environment to utilize them, then that is certainly the way that I hope we go.
Yeah, I'm literally on the same token as Amanda from the standpoint of, they stuck to their script, which is no animals in movies, no animals in movies, no animals in movies. And it's just not feasible. And then she's like, yeah, but then these people brought their own animals. And I'm like, well, that's like a double standard then, because you're saying don't have animals in movies, but it's okay if these people bring them because it's actually their pets. So instead of just saying don't do something that's unrealistic, let's get things that are realistic and let's talk about what really is going on, which is some of these, animal farms that are, bad places for them to be, and the way the animals are treated on set while they're waiting to be used, or finding the wild animals. Let's go ahead and start putting into action some plans that actually say, okay, well, if we're raising animals in a proper way and we're treating them as if they were our own pets, then there's no reason why I can't say, hey, bring my dog down to Ford Modeling Agency for a Petco commercial. It's ethical treatment of animals, not exclusion of animals. There's ways to ethically treat animals and still get the effect like John was having about, hey, or even Aaron when he was saying like, I got a dog because I saw a dog in a movie. There's ways to ethically do it without eliminating them completely.
Movies, television, whatever, has some sort of educational responsibility to show us something that we wouldn't be able to see otherwise, and to help inspire us into moving into areas that would freely and encourage us to grow our lives in that sort of thing. So that being said, I feel like there's having a real animal on the screen in front of you has a higher amount of impact to that person and to inspiring that person than seeing a CGI version of it. There's a lot of people who would be reflected by what I often call uncanny valley, and they would lose that connection and lose that ability to or lose that opportunity to be inspired to go into marine biology and learn about what's going on in the ocean, to learn about animal husbandry and what's going on in the factory farms, or go into water conservation and really find out how much damage those factory farms are having on us. So there's a lot of opportunity for movies and television to use its platform to show us the real thing, to inspire us to make these moves. At the same time, I agree with the sentiment and I agree with everything she was saying, but this all or nothing aspect of it is something that I can't really abide by, because I would rather see reform and change and people taking positive strides to take care of animals, so that animals are, so that we serve as the shepherds of the animals and continue to inspire people to be shepherds to those animals, versus saying absolutely not. Everything is there, but maybe that's part of their plan. That's something I might have had to ask her. Is the plan to ask for absolutely not, so that pushes people to try to come to the table with concessions and to work their way into something that cares for animals more?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that the animal industry needs to be regulated probably heavier.
Absolutely.
You can't trust people with their own actors. I mean, the Me Too movement happened for a reason, right? People were betraying the trust and were acting unethically with women across the board. And the idea that those same people, and I'm not trying to be harsh, but a lot of actors are narcissists, and a lot of people working on films can tend to be as are everywhere, right? The idea that they wouldn't do the same or worse to animals that cannot call for help, that cannot respond, that cannot just yelp out, really. I'm sorry. There's just no argument for that to me. That has been proven. This is an industry that has unfortunately been behind the times for a long time in many respects, especially when it comes to legalities. I totally believe that there needs to be reform in the movie industry, because I'm sure there are animals that are being abused on a regular basis. On the same token, I don't believe in all or nothing. I'm just somebody that doesn't believe in black and white. There's always a gray area to everything. There's always some nuance. If you don't see nuance, it's because you're blind to it. You close your eyes to it. And that's your right. But on the same token, I pointed out what I feel is hypocrisy from the organization themselves. And I'll talk more about the euthanization in a bit. But just from the uncanny valley perspective, and if you don't know what that is, that means essentially if you're watching something that's computer generated, you are taken out of that moment because you can tell that it's computer generated. You know, you're not lost in the moment. And it's very rare that something hits it pitch perfect, but that's what obviously computer animators were striving to achieve. Well, I was trying to picture someone petting a CGI puppy or riding a CGI horse, and I've seen it, and it, granted, I have years of film study and film criticism and film watching. On the same token, I've seen it done just not wonderfully more often than not. So it's doable, but I do see the uncanny valley of it. I do think it's going to be hard to be lost in it. If I'm watching a Western, and maybe it's because I'm conditioned, right? Because I've seen it my whole life. So to me, the idea of not riding a horse in a Western, like what? How are they getting from point A to point B? But I also have watched many Westerns where I'm like, well, that doesn't seem fair to the horses. Like they're carrying all the weight, they're dragging all this. Like, that's not fun. We've got cars. People shouldn't be riding horses. Can we just like show them when they arrive and the horses are just standing there? Do they have to be pulling wagons? Things like that. There are things where I think we should be moving toward exceptions to the rule and getting away from the animals doing manual labor, because that time has passed. But there are also definitely uncanny valley moments where I think you'll be lost if you completely CGI in it. You'll have a hard time connecting with the film or the TV show.
Yeah, incredible journey with Michael J. Fox doing one of the voiceovers. Like, that movie does not work if it's a CGI dog and cat and then coming up to the family farm at the last minute at the end of the movie. The Uncanny Valley just would not work to get the emotional impact that you got, because it was like actual animals doing that approach to the family.
Okay, Amanda. So Courtney did address their tactics to a degree. Since you actually had this occur to you, how do you feel about that response? And feel free to elaborate if I didn't explain it properly.
No, you did. I mean, there was a little bit more to it, like leading up to the event where it was like harassing phone calls. But I can respect that they don't want to support any industry that utilizes meat in their products. But at the same time, shouldn't we be striving more, my opinion, and this is again us coming back to not the all or nothing mindset. I feel like we should be striving more towards making sure that the places that we're going to are ethically treating animals. And from what I did a little bit of research, other than the misrepresentation of their boneless wings actually being more like nuggets, which was a lawsuit that happened, there's nothing that I could find to determine that they have unethically been treating chickens, which was kind of the point that she was going back to. Mm-hmm. And I can respect like the optics and everything, but at the same time, I feel like there's a very different discussion between making sure animals are treated fairly and making sure we're doing things to rehabilitate endangered animals, which is what this was. It was more like for birds and things like that. And it wasn't to support chicken. Like, I don't even think anybody bought any chicken or wings or anything. That's not even Buffalo Wild Wings' top selling thing. But to me, we're still missing the point of how aggressive and berating that approach is. And we see it with a lot of other campaigns where it's not coming from a place of education, coming from a place of understanding, coming from a place of trying to drive everyone to the same mission. That particular approach is, you agree with us or we're going to burn your business down. And they were literally posting negative reviews and having people post negative reviews of our business because we were sponsoring an event that was helping endangered animals and was held at Buffalo Wild Wings. And it was in an outside setting. It was really, the whole thing was very bizarre. I don't know if that's a pure reflection of PETA.
Or a local chapter.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I don't know. It's still, to me, it still rubs me the wrong way. Like, I think we want to, take a more aggressive approach for sure to help people understand, but you certainly don't need to do it in that manner. And that's not going to get people to be on your side anyway.
Can we take a couple steps back? Did Amanda just say that the top selling item at Buffalo Wild Wings isn't Buffalo Wild Wings?
Isn't
Yeah,
their wings.
It's boneless wings, which are not technically wings. And that's why the lawsuit was said it was false advertising.
I thought that was weird. Anyhow, I think what Courtney was pointing out was more so the places in which Buffalo Wild Wings gets its chicken meat from. It's not necessarily saying that Buffalo Wild Wings themselves are buying the chicken wings, but they're buying from larger factory farm settings in which
they're buying it from one organization that specifically I researched them. It's called Inspire. They have not had any allegations or anything put out there in the media, at least, that they have unethical chicken farms. And my standpoint is, if you don't know that, you should not try to burn a business down based on assumptions and presumptions.
Right. Just because there's the food industry and the food industry gets mass amounts of chicken, the assumption is that they're all coming from chicken farms. And that's not true. There's definitely
the factory chicken farms. Yes.
But there's definitely businesses that are in the food space that are specifically actually saying, like, we are trying to find locally grown, locally sourced, cared for animals to bring into as our suppliers, because it's all part of the movement, right? They don't want to get canceled by their customers because they're not doing those kind of things. I mean, it goes back to what I said earlier. It's about ethical treatment. So in this case for Amanda's thing, it's like if the company they're buying the boneless chicken like nugget substance
chicken
from,
breasted fried ball,
because I don't want to be part of the lawsuit because I called it a chicken wing. But if there's nothing there that says that they're actually buying it from a place that, the chickens are, I watched Food Inc., right? The chickens, they're so fat, they can't stand on their legs.
Right.
100% totally behind, going after those people, shutting that down, on board with the PETA stance on it. But when you're saying that it's a generalization, like, again, there's ethical ways to treat animals. Animals are part of the food chain. Even though technically humans are not supposed to eat meat. I mean, we are omnivores, but our teeth are not designed to be carnivorous. Our teeth are designed to be plant eaters and vegetarians.
My steak says different, but I get what you're saying.
I got some leftover steak I'm about to eat.
Humans weren't really designed to eat meat, right? They were designed to eat vegetables.
You can tell by the fact that meat kills us on a pretty regular basis. I'm not even talking about the cancer side of it. I'm talking about the fact that meat is responsible that's where we get our cholesterol from. And humans are not designed to process cholesterol. And that's why it builds up in some of us more than others, because some of us are a little bit more resistant to it, but a lot of us, it's a problem for a lot of us. And the whole reason why we are as meat dependent is because...
And deep fried everything.
Yeah.
It's not just... it is, dude. I've researched the shit out of it. It is not just meat. It is also...
No, it's just meat.
No, it's not just meat.
It is just... If you're eating deep fried meat, because there's meat in it, then yes. Or if there's a meat product in it, then yes. That's where the cholesterol is coming from.
There's vegetable oil. There's lots of oil that are fried, and oil does affect cholesterol.
Which is why people are switching out the oils, but that's not animals. So we can move on from that.
I mean, coconut oil raises cholesterol levels. Like, it's not just meat. That's all I'm saying. We eat deep fried everything. You can't. I know that you're a whatever you are, flexitarian or whatever you call yourself, and that's fine. I'm not knocking it. There's vegetarians. I respect that analogy, but you can't just say it's all meat. It's not all meat. It's also oil. You can Google away. You're going to see oil.
I'm working on it.
Have fun.
Anyhow, aside from the top, we kind of got derailed because of the chicken conversation.
Because I'm getting attacked for liking meat.
But I mean, it was part of the interview. I think they have an actual point that
I think they do have a point. Yes, they do.
There are definitely things that are bad. There are bad handlers in movie sets. There's bad farms that produce food. Those are the things that should be talked about. But the problem is
there's bad human traits as well. Like, we should eat less meat. I do agree with that 1,000%. There's a lot of things we could do that we don't do that humans just don't want to make.
Right, but the organization is not called, People for the Elimination of Theatrical Animals. It's called Ethical Treatment. So that's the problem I have with this interview so far, is that she's like stuck on use CGI, use puppets, use animatronics, get rid of the animals altogether. You can use animals, just use them ethically.
So you're saying your standpoint is a little bit of a frustration between their stance on certain perspectives, not this woman in particular, because she's representing the organization.
Courtney, right? Courtney was delightful. delightful human being.
I give her a lot of credit. I really do, because I mean, even in tough questions, she answered them and didn't run away screaming or or like defer. You know what? I don't really answer that, and then just like move on. She really tried to handle it as much as she could.
Mm-hmm.
She did. She primarily works in film and TV production, just to be fair.
But there's a disconnect between what their organization, at least originally intended to be, how they've presented over the last, I don't know, decade and a half probably, is very different from that. And this interview is kind of a representation of that. So we all maybe have this misconception of the direction of where PETA has gone. And I think we all have a pretty good understanding of where that's at now. Like, this interview was consistent with what I thought of PETA, but there were some elements where I felt like, okay, maybe we're getting more of a compromise if we can still have them participate in the film industry, but not have them on set where the filmmakers are taking production to the animals versus transporting them in, having them housed in, you know, like probably a dirty trailer and not really being able to do anything else, and all of these other horrendous conditions and not being fed. Mm-hmm. Those are the bad circumstances we want to avoid, but we can still have that happen, is where I think we all align on. And I think it's about PETA's messaging transforming. Like, I think they would have much more impact if they transformed their brand and messaging from absolutely can't eat any meat, absolutely can't have animals participate in any of this whatsoever, and have it where it's more just ethically managed. But I do respect the perspective of like animals not being able to provide consent. Something to consider.
Dogs and cats don't provide consent either. When you take them to your house and you train them,
100%.
they are not giving consent either. They don't necessarily want to live in your home. That's why they run away, and people will do everything they can to keep them on a leash and keep them to that. That's an adoptive home is also a prison. Like, that's a fair statement.
Yeah, it's really no different than a zoo at the end of the day.
So all the animals in TV production and everything else, that's all basically captivity, right? Our homes, they're homes.
Just varying levels.
It's varying levels of captivity. Now, what we can do is definitely improve those circumstances. I mean, make sure that they are taken care of, that they have comfortable surroundings, that it's not just about what happens on set, that it's also about what happens, like you were saying, Amanda, when they get back to wherever they live, to make sure those quarters and those areas are taken care of and are as safe and humane as possible. Because I just don't agree that it should be zero. I don't think everything needs to be a zero-sum game. That's an opinion, but...
And maybe I'll go on my rant here, and then we can come back to like specific animals that affected us in the movies and stuff. Because the thing that really bothered me was when Courtney was saying like, yeah, well, these people and they transport them and the transportation is so stressful. Yeah, I have 2 dogs. I have to take them to the vet. They don't want to go to the doctor, but it's an ethical thing to do, to take them to the doctor to get their shots so that they're not sick and dying, and get regular physical checkups. We do that as human beings. But yeah, when they're in the crate in the backseat of the car driving for 25 minutes, they're freaking stressed out as all kinds of get out. But at the same time, I'm also giving them treats. I'm also giving them a bath. I'm also cutting their nails. I'm also making sure that they're like comfortable when they get home and they have the space that they can sleep and rest and recover from that stressful situation. So I'm ethically transporting them the best that I can. It's not to say that all transportation is unethical, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we're going to have pets. It's just the way humans are wired. We've taken the fox and some version of the fox and domesticated it into a dog over years. And now we have dog and we have cats, right? And we keep them on a leash because they've been so domesticated that they can't go out into the wild anymore, as Aaron suggested, because if they go out in the wild, they're going to be food and fodder for whatever else is out there, like coyotes and bears and whatnot, because they don't know how to fend for themselves anymore because they've been domesticated. So that's why we keep them on a leash, because they wouldn't survive. So it's ethically to keep them on a leash because we're protecting them from imminent death if they were to be released.
Yeah, at this point.
And then the last point is, this ties into the euthanasia later probably, but I work for a dog rescue, and where I'm not necessarily part of the no-kill movement, which was talked about on the interview. Mm-hmm. Like we take dogs from no-kill or from kill shelters, bring them in, even if they have no homes, even if they are non-adoptable, and we give them a home. And then it sometimes drains the accounts of these rescue organizations because we don't have enough funding coming into those rescue organizations to do that ethical work. Therefore, an organization like PETA should be helping to raise money to support organizations like the rescue that I work for, so that we can make sure that they're not killed for no reason because they're not adoptable or because there isn't enough people bringing them in.
Could you imagine if we killed foster kids and homeless people?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking this entire interview. I was like, humans are also animals. Let's just replace horse with person, and it suddenly automatically changes. No, it should be exactly the same treatment. You know, we're treating actors a certain way. We're making them get up at 5 a.m. to do crazy ass stunts and short skirts and high heels, and it's 40 degrees outside. Like, the humans are being treated just as poorly as the animals are. So let's just not use humans and just do everything CGI in the movies and just make animation, and Aaron will never watch a thing ever again.
That's true. I will have nothing to watch. It will suck.
I mean, there has to be an understanding of what ethical means. And if you're doing everything you can possibly do for the right intentions, the good intentions, to make sure that everybody feels safe and secure. And I think the biggest thing is education. Like, you can say no animals in the movies. Well, then let's educate the people and spend the money on the things that we need to do, and not spend the money on posters and signs and go stand outside of a Buffalo Wild Wings where nothing's going to happen because they're still going to go buy from the supplier the next day. You know, we need to go and educate the suppliers, and we need to educate the people that are in the purchase streams, and we need to educate the trainers and the handlers. And if people treat these animals like they treat their pets, there would be ethical treatment of animals, and they could be used on movie sets and television shows and commercials.
Can't teach human decency.
Real quick, the ASPCA has a really good position. I think that aligns with what we're talking about, and not to derail and talk about another organization, but they have on their website that they are not categorically opposed to the use of animal quote unquote actors in movies, television, theater, advertising, etc., provided that they are acquired, trained, transported, housed, and in every way handled humanely with facilities and care appropriate to each species. Hell yeah, I'm on board with that.
100%.
Okay, so Amanda, we heard from Troy, so your turn. We'll just keep it in line in terms of anything you want to talk about specifically from the interview you heard.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about some of the things that kind of stood out to me, but I think there's also I'll save the euthanasia because I know that that's going to be a really big topic too that you're passionate about.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But I guess what I took away from it, like something that I found interesting with it, is that and I know she's media, so she has all of her statements very prepared, but a lot of what I heard at times seemed to contradict itself in other times. And so to me, that means possibly that PETA needs to evaluate what their full stance is and why they have their stance on certain things. Part of me wonders if they go for this all or nothing mindset as like an overachievement, because then if we underperform to their expectations, we're at least getting some improvement. So I don't know what you guys think about that, if that has any sort of bearing.
What's the statement? I can't achieve perfection, but if I strive for perfection, I can achieve excellence. Yeah, exactly.
I want to be fair as I can to Courtney. On the same token, I mean, some of the questions we asked are probably out of her purview for what she typically would deal with. So I think she handled them as well as she could.
Yeah, it's no reflection of her at all.
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely times where she was like I don't have the backstory on that or the information on that, so I can't answer that question.
Absolutely.
Some people are going to listen to that and go like, that's fair because she doesn't have the information. Some people are going to listen to that and go, she's dodging the question,
but
she didn't want to answer.
Yeah, I don't think she was dodging, and I did not get that from her in any respect.
No, I didn't get that from her either.
Some humans are going to be like, oh, she's totally dodging. And other people
there's people listening that are already like against PETA before they start. I put out there that I was interviewing PETA, and there was a lot of I hate PETA conversation. And I'm just like, why? And I would ask, like, genuinely, why do you, well, because they do this, and I look it up and I'm like, no, they didn't. Like, I don't know what you're mad about. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that there aren't examples. Amanda shared one, or I shared one of Amanda's. On the same token, I mean, if you think about it, she's right. The whole reason we're even having this conversation, we had this podcast, we had that interview, is because they made us think about the horse that died on Amazon Prime. So she's right. Mm-hmm. That part is right. And it's important to know that sometimes, and I hate to say it, but in this world where there's continuous media that goes nonstop, sometimes the only way you hear anything is if you make a large noise. And it's just the world we live in. And it's not great, it's not wonderful, but sometimes it gets the job done. And it brings awareness to your particular cause. It doesn't mean that I agree with them on everything, but I do have a greater appreciation for what they do after the interview. I will say that.
Yeah, me too. I think the elements of being able to train and educate and even their willingness to talk with some of our more independent filmmakers who she said, if you don't have a budget for CGI, contact us so we can try to coordinate with you what that looks like for you to do things in the most ethical and humane way. And that, I think, is a side of PETA that doesn't really get a lot of visibility. There's more focus on the vegetarian side of, with the meat and the foods that we eat versus the proper care of animals in all circumstances.
Obviously, there's no such thing as bad press to spell my name right. So PETA gets a lot of press, which is good, but a lot of it is bad press. And there isn't anything saying here are the good things that we are doing, especially for independent filmmakers, which was our biggest concern when we talked about this, was that if you put CGI in, it's going to put a lot of filmmakers out of business because they can't afford the CGI. So if there are resources and, lack of a better term, scholarships that independent filmmakers could tap into through an organization like PETA, and then people supporting PETA with funds that they can then turn around and help independent filmmakers do this in the best way possible to achieve their dream, that's great partnership. I think that's awesome.
I don't agree they get a lot of bad press. I mean, they get some here and there. I don't think they get a lot.
I think they get a lot of bad. I think they get a lot of bad.
Because they're too in your face?
Yeah, it's either too in the face or too over the top or too, like you said, hard line, absolutely not. There's no gray. There's no discussion. There's no, what we're having right now is we said, hey, let's go ahead and open up this forum. Let's go ahead and learn and become educated and understand, and then say, okay, now that we're here and having this open conversation, here are pros, here are cons, here are bad things, but we're all becoming educated in this specific podcast episode on all sides of the aisle versus I'm just going to stay what I want to stay and you have to have dialogue in order to make progress.
I think one of the things we need to start trying to remember is that and I said this at the beginning of the episode, there might be an aspect of they're asking for the moons so that we can get them halfway. But also, when it comes to, Aaron commented on how he put out a feelers for questions so that we can get some idea of what our listeners want to listen to. And if you look at that thread, a lot of it are Control-C, Control-V of a lot of urban legends about PETA and or stories from movies. Not actual stories from movies as in it happened at a movie, a story within the movie. So it's a fictional story of somebody making up something. So if you look at a lot of what's being said, it's this own urban legend idea of a nebulous concept of some people doing something to an extent of where it's much more annoying than they really are being. I mean, on one sense, it's brilliant because they've become this boogeyman for a lot of the industries out there that they are trying to impact. But on the other side, it does lose its messaging a little bit because of the fact that there's people out there who don't fully understand the joke of it or the reality of it or the impact that they're going for in a lot of ways. And like Aaron said, after talking to Courtney, I felt like, okay, well, there's a lot of this I can get behind. There's a lot of this I can believe in, and I want to be behind a lot of it. It's where I start running it up against a wall is the all or nothing aspect of it. And again, I don't know if that's their design of saying, I want the moon, just meet me halfway, or if it's what they legitimately want.
I mean, I will say based on what I heard, it feels like there is no gray. That's legitimately the vibe I've gotten. And everything I've read, it feels very, there is no gray. We want animals out of film. We want to be all CGI. And at this point in American film, I get the very real fact that we have the ability to do that on somewhat of a level. But most films, not most, many films are independent films, right? They're independent productions. And I understand that what she's saying, reach out to us and we'll help you. I don't want PETA influencing art. I don't think that is important. I don't think that's the way to go. I don't think any organization should dictate the point of a story or the direction of a story. Like, that's no different than studio interference to me.
Yeah, that's a good call out, because that was something that stood out to me too.
If they want to give them direction, like advice, here's how you can do it without using animals or impacted animals, or here's how to research the facilities that you use to make sure that the animals are cared for and make sure that they are having a wonderful sleeping environment or whatever that is, okay, I'm all for it. But if it's, you can't have animals and here's why, I just don't agree with that. Hard stop. There's nothing more to elaborate on, because now you're impacting the story, and that's not any organization's priority. I'm not saying that was her intent. I'm just saying, like, I'm just spitballing from thoughts of the conversation. But the vibe I got was very much it's black and white. They want to get to that point. And I don't necessarily think that that's bad either. Like, your goal is to make sure that animals are cared for. I'm fine if that's your goal, but it's important to me that it's across the board. And that's where the euthanasia thing comes in, which I'll talk to in a second, because first, John, you can fill in the facts or talk about whatever you want to talk about on that.
The question which I tried to ask on the interview, which I completely blanked out on in the process of asking the question, doesn't matter. The rabbit hole that I went down when it came to PETA and some of the what seems like hypocrisy in which they could try to preach is that within their Virginia facility, now as I understand it, the Virginia facility is actually their home facility as well, and 74% of the animals that are surrendered to them were euthanized in the year of 2020. Now, if you look at the NACC for the same state, that's 10%. And if you look at the Virginia state-run facilities, that's another 8%. So versus those two organizations, you're looking at 74% of the animals versus 8 or 10%. Now, it depends on how you want to look at this. They're saying that this is happening to sick, old, and unadoptable dogs or cats or animals that they are doing this to. Now, there is no definition for unadoptable. It is just it's just a term that they kind of put it as far as reasoning is concerned, but the numbers are still relative.
There's a definition. The definition is it's costing us money, and therefore we can't keep paying for this because we're not recouping anything off of it.
Well, you don't know that, so let's not. Yeah,
that's how it is in the no-kill shelters or the kill shelters. They're just trying to make room.
Okay, moving on. I'm just saying that's their comment on why they're doing it. And I'm also identifying the idea that there's no definition as to why it is like that. Now, the other side of it is that when you are a shelter that accepts everything without question, you're going to get a lot more dogs. You're going to get a lot more animals, in period. So there's a couple of different ways to look at the argument. However, there's not a lot of clear documentation as to why or how or what's going on. But their stance, and you can hear it in the interview, which is it is better off to put the animal down versus let it suffer, let it go to a bad home, let it go, let any of the number of things that happen. It is better for the animal to do it in a humane way. It just seems to me that 74% is a high number, and we're in a world where during COVID, especially in my area, absolutely no shelters had dogs anymore because all of a sudden all these families decided to adopt every single dog there was out there. The shelters were trying to bring dogs in to be able to give out more dogs because every day more people were showing up to adopt dogs. And again, yeah, sure, it was during COVID that happened, but and so it was a situation in which people decided to all of a sudden step up and be above themselves. But we can do a lot more than just euthanizing animals, and yeah. So that's what that whole part of the conversation was all about.
Yeah, and absolutely, you should not be buying a dog or cat or anything from a pet store from a major farm breeder. Like, there are so many animals that need homes that really adoption is the way that we should be getting all of our pets at the end of the day. But all of my dogs have been adopted from either a rescue or some other kind of shelter. Because, like, why are you spending thousands of dollars on a purebred dog? Like, that's so much money.
Because I want to.
Like, when you can go to a shelter and get a perfectly good dog that is also purebred, because I have a purebred, almost show quality dog that's a case hound, or Keeshond is how the Americans like to pronounce it. The reason why there hasn't been a run on that particular breed is because Disney has never featured a case hound in their movies. So that is something PETA talked about that is true. Like the minute you see a certain type of dog in the film, everybody goes out and buys that dog. That's not great. But at the same time, it's a matter of trying to understand that there's just so many animals out there that we don't need to farm produce more animals. Like we have to do what Courtney was saying. Like the spayed and neutered is definitely the thing that we need to be focused on. That's why Bob Barker said it for as many years as he did and as many days as he did at the end of The Price is Right. We need to control the population. I mean, even now, like you think of deer. I was riding my bike, in the city, right? We're in the suburbs, but I'm in the suburbs and there's deer everywhere, like coming up in the backyards of people, because it's overpopulated with animals. And sometimes you have to do certain things in order to control those populations.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've never really been a big fan of hunting and everything, but I have heard about that being, ways to control populations and everything. I also, one thing that I've kind of been trying to determine myself is I've heard a lot about, I've always heard from adoption places that your rescue places that you should spay and neuter your animal like immediately. Like they should always be spay and neutered. And a lot of those rescue places will automatically do it. Like you don't get a choice in it. But I've also been reading and hearing that it's beneficial for puppies to go a period of time in their life, like as they're developing before that happens. And I get the idea of limiting that because you don't want overpopulation, but how is that any different than like forced circumcisions and stuff?
Well,
like
the span of time they're talking about is
it's like 2 years.
No, it's less than that. Depending on the dog itself, but like female dogs, they should have at least one heat in them before you get them spayed.
I'm pretty sure it's like 4 to 6 months, but that's...
Well, you guys have little dogs.
Yeah.
I have big dogs.
Here's what we should do.
Larger ones.
We're not vets. We shouldn't talk to this. Period.
I'm looking at AKC right now, though.
Yeah, because I remember my vet telling me to do it before the first heat. So we should just leave it. But I do want to segue to euthanasia, right? Because we did talk about that. And I want to give her the benefit of the doubt. That's not her specialty. That's not what she's focused on. So it's, Courtney can only speak to what she knew about it, right? I've always done research on this. It's a very personal topic to me. I still feel the same. Now, granted, I haven't done the PETA Center like she recommended, and I probably should do that. I probably honestly should do that just to hear the stories. But for me, this is just my personal opinion. I cannot take seriously the argument for euthanizing a healthy, unthreatening animal simply for population control. Amanda, she made, I'm sure it was a flippant comment or whatever, but foster kids and homeless people. Well, homeless people specifically, what's the difference? You know what I mean?
Seriously.
It's an animal versus a human. I get that. But on the same token, a life is a life, right? That's what we're making the argument about. What's the difference? So to me, I will say that argument that is being made, whoever makes it, is no different than the case for testing on animals to save humans. It's all about what's best for people and not what's best for animals. That's my problem with it. Now, I think PETA does some good. I truly, truly do. I genuinely believe that. But on this issue, to me, it's complete hypocrisy to me. These animals are kept in cages of sorts while waiting for suitable homes, right? While PETA themselves says that is bad for an animal. And then euthanize animals that cannot find a home. So do we euthanize the homeless? I don't think so. I think that would probably be very cruel by most people's standards. So absolutely not. And of course, that's an extreme statement. But so is justifying the murder of thousands of animals rather than give them a chance to fend for themselves. Will they die? Possibly. But that's their life. I've seen plenty of parents where I don't know where their kids are going to end up, and God knows they could go sideways. I don't know.
We even use the term feral children.
Yes, feral children. It's their life, is it not? So do we get to cherry pick when it's appropriate to care about an animal's life? Because that's all I hear with that argument. And it's nothing against Courtney. It's nothing against PETA. It's nothing against any. It's just when any organization or person makes that statement and feels very strongly about it, I would make the case we're choosing people over animals at that point, and you can't tell me any different because there's no case that sounds any different to me. You're making the choice where you just said we shouldn't make that choice, but you are making that choice in that moment.
I'm going to play devil's advocate real quick, even though I like to eat meat. That's the exact same argument, though, for being vegan and vegetarian. I should say vegetarian, not necessarily vegan. But that's 100% the argument. We as people like to consume those products that we are incredibly used to, that we are reliant on. But we know that there are alternatives where we could get the sufficient nutrients that we need, that we get from meat, but we choose our preferences over those animals' lives. Like, to be fair,
sure,
to play devil's advocate, that's the exact same.
Call me a hypocrite.
It's the exact same argument.
I will eat meat. On the same token,
it doesn't take away PETA's hypocrisy.
Food chain. I would make that argument. On the same token, plants are alive. You're killing plants. I mean, you can really make that case because it's true. So,
if you're killing plants, you're technically taking out things that produce oxygen that humans need to breathe.
There's always a case to be made. To me, just putting an animal down, though, for no reason other than we couldn't find you a home is a different argument to me than we're making food for the planet.
Yep.
Now, I'm not saying killing is not great either way, but
now if you get an animal in and the animal clearly has like cancer or 2 legs missing and just doesn't have the
unhealthy
quality of life,
or threatened animal. I mean, I get that. I totally understand.
I had a dog for 8 months that I got from the rescue that we worked for, adopted. 7 months, dog was perfectly fine. Month 8, it's massive cancer. And that dog would sit underneath the table.
What?
Yeah. That dog would sit underneath the kitchen table. And if I came anywhere near that dog, this is a dog that was perfectly fine for 6 months. In month 7, that dog went right back to like wild instincts. And if I came anywhere near the dog would growl. The dog bit me once when I was trying to just help get it out from underneath the table to go outside to go to the bathroom. So, I mean, there are definitely times where you can say, yes, this animal is not exactly in a good place, and therefore probably should be taken to the vet and an assertion made.
Wasn't speaking to that. I'm speaking to we couldn't find you a home, therefore we have to put you down.
Yeah. Perfectly healthy animals do not deserve to be killed because there's nowhere to put them.
If it means we got to trip over and walking them somewhere, that's just the way it goes.
Well, and here's the thing. Like, I went to Haiti, right? And the number one thing they told us when we went to Haiti, it's like, don't pet the dogs. Like, these dogs are not dogs that are pets like you have at home. These are dogs that literally wander around the streets in the neighborhoods and the boroughs, like just fending for themselves. And yes, there's probably, in the community that we stayed in, there was probably, I think, 4 that I can remember specifically off the top of my head. The same 4 dogs were in the community. So that's like, it's the community pets because it's the same 4. And people would put out extra food or whatever was left at the market at the end of the day when they were cleaning up all the food and scraps were left behind. The dogs were eating off those scraps. But, you know, the dogs seemed perfectly happy the time we were there. And then other people had pet goats, and the goats were not kept in cages or tied up or anything. They literally were eating the grass, and they became the lawnmowers. So the goats are getting fed, and I'm getting a service from the goats. And then, you know, if I ended up needing to have a feast of some kind because of a party or whatever, there might be a goat missing the next day. But
all right, let's move on.
But I mean, there are parts of the world where animals do run free, like Aaron was talking about. Like, just let them go and let them fend for themselves. And you'd be surprised how many would actually figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about cats, right? In that, and like if put the cats, and anytime you put out the cats, the bird population dies or whatever. But you know what also dies? The rodent and mouse and rat population too. You know, it's not that we're saying that cats killing birds and cats killing mice, and all of a sudden we got a bird and mouse problem shortage or whatever. It's because it's called the food chain. It's called, there's a natural order of predator and prey, and that's just what's happening. The cats are doing the thing that they're supposed to be doing.
Something else will get the cats. Something bigger.
Yeah.
Can anybody else like kind of sidetrack from the serious part?
Yeah, let's get out of it.
I could not stop laughing because Courtney doesn't know Aaron. When she brought up cats as an analogy for like trying to help him come to the conclusion of like, join us, understand that we don't want to do this to these animals and we should be kind to them and all that stuff. And she brought up cats, and I was like, This is not how you sell it.
That won me back to the argument. Really. I was like,
I know. Right?
Aaron's like, people for the ethical treatment of animals except cats.
Yeah.
Yeah, truly.
If there is a PETA but cats, I would join that. Yeah.
He just doesn't like mean cats.
I don't like cats and mean, nice. I just don't like any of them. Yeah.
Well, they're most of them are pretty mean.
They just look
or at
at
least
you
have a mean side.
like that girl in high school that I wanted to take to prom, but she was so mean. So mean.
Yeah.
Or guy, whatever you're into.
Or non-binary.
Yeah. All right. So, last question. Have there been animals in film or TV that impacted you specifically? Let's end on a high note. So, I will say I talked about Benji, also Lassie, Flipper. I mean, I would still argue that my love for animals is directly related to the animals themselves as they were depicted on TV and film. I mean that wholeheartedly. That's true. Oh Heavenly Dog is really, I fell in love with Benji. I needed a mutt. And my disdain for cats is directly related to actual cats. It actually has nothing to do with film or television.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about my mom and like when I sit there and go like, if I were 3 movies that I would say, yep, that's my mom. It's Towering Inferno, Poseidon's Adventure, and Black Stallion. So like that, you have that moment of connecting with this majestic black horse, and you like that makes you think of your mom. And it's like, well, if that would have been a computer generated thing back in whatever it was, 1980s when Black Stallion came out, like it would have looked like garbage.
Well, especially in 1980, it would look like Tron.
Yeah. Seabiscuit wouldn't be as powerful as it was, and it was an Academy Award-winning film, and I think it won an award.
I think it was nominated. I don't think it won.
It was definitely nominated, but it would not have looked the same if there was CGI horses. I mean, horse racing
might have won the best picture if it had a CGI horse.
Maybe would have won best animation or something, best effects. But yeah, there's definitely movies that like Lassie. I remember Lassie. Like I watched with my grandpa. Like you woke up at Saturday at 6 a.m. and it was on, and you know everybody wanted to have a Lassie dog in their house. Like everybody watched Lassie.
Agreed. Love Lassie.
And everybody cried like a baby when Old Yeller died.
You had to bring that up. Spoiler alert. Some people don't know how it ends.
Spoiler alert. They'll CGI him back in the sequel.
Right. He's a deadite all of a sudden. Some of the movies that I thought about when I considered this, yes, there's Benji. There's a couple of other ones with dogs, but the ones that stick out the most is so you got My Side of the Mountain, and it's a 1969 film. This kid named Sam decides he wants to live life like Thoreau wrote in his book Walden, and he runs away from home and he finds a hollowed out tree in the middle of the woods and on a side of a mountain, makes friends with bears and porcupines and all sorts of things, and he decides he needs to be able to eat, and so he captures a falcon and uses it, trains the falcon up, and he uses it as a way to make sure that he can eat, so that he can use falconry as his hunting tool. Also, I mentioned in the interview, but there's Isabeau from Lady Hawk. I just love that aspect of the whole story of Lady Hawk, and that hawk itself only just recently passed, I want to say in the last 10 to 15 years. So if you consider how old that movie is, and the hawk made it all the way to about 10 or 15 years ago, that's a good long time and a good long life, especially for that hawk. So yeah, those are the movies that I can think of.
In addition to the ones that have been mentioned, a couple, Free Willy movie was just, man. And it's also the reason why, I shouldn't say it's entirely the reason, but it's a part of the reason why I was like, I don't want to support aquariums and zoos and things like that, because I know how fulfilling their life should be. And I don't feel like this tiny little, even if it's large to us, it's still small to them for whales and dolphins and stuff like that. So
do you know that obviously that jump was CGI? If I remember, yeah, that scene was CGI.
But the most impactful one, and it's just from like an emotional standpoint, is Old Yeller.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you you have a story like that. I would say like for younger generations, they'd probably have something similar with like Marley and Me. And it's just, you have that investment. You see maybe your own pet in that animal. You see the bond that's built. You see how strong and beautiful that relationship is between animal and human. And, to see the impact of grief and all of that is always just really sad and makes you think about and contemplate the relationships you have and how you would handle and what you would do if you lost those people or animals or anything like that.
Does anybody remember there? Oh God, it wasn't that long ago. And I think Dennis Quaid did the voice of the dog or something, but it was a dog. Was it A Dog's Life, where it's like the dog has a narrator and then the dog is reincarnated as a different dog. And then Dennis
Are you
Quaid.
talking about A Dog's
Purpose.
Journey?
Is it
It's A Dog's Purpose, 2017.
Okay.
Oh.
Love that movie. I absolutely love that movie. It was such a sweet, sweet story about this dog is basically reincarnated and then goes to his owner years later, and the owner recognizes him just because of certain doggy aspects.
Characteristics.
Characteristics. Yeah. Oh my God. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Broke my heart. Oh, goodness. Well, I think that'll do it. And I do want to once again thank PETA. I know we've kind of gone back and forth on PETA on some aspects, but I really respect that they did the interview. And Courtney, I think, was a wonderful person to do it. She's a very upbeat and very passionate about her cause, and I respect her views. We don't have to agree on everything, but I appreciate the work she's doing and the effort she's making to try to make a change. A lot of people don't make any effort to make any change. So
Absolutely.
thanks for trying. And we'll see what differences we make. I really hope we can get some change in Hollywood. And I hope, much like the Me Too movement, John alluded to that in the interview. Like, I hope there is a moment where it really gets shooken up and people have to always think of the animals and where they're going home to and what happens when they leave the set, as opposed to just when they're there.
That'll happen when there's legislation in place or policies from the film industry.
Or massive incident. But I do agree, animals can't speak, so it's harder to catch those things. So we should definitely regulate it to keep an eye on it.
You haven't met my dog. My dog speaks all the time, just not English.
I've heard your dog all the time, and I agree. Yeah, I agree. Okay. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. Everybody, thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. Let us know your thoughts. You can email us feedback@thehollywoodoutsiders.com. Share it on social media. Tell your friends about the episode. If you think we're idiots about the conversation we just had, share that too. I don't care. Just get it out there on social media and tell your friends. And remember, the next time you head to a theater or you sit comfortably on your couch streaming away, buy popcorn. But definitely tell your friends. Don't tell the animals. They can't speak. Tell your friends. Social media. Share it.